Hi, welcome to episode number 15 of the Better Conversations podcast. We speak to the leaders of today so that the leaders of tomorrow can be inspired, enriched, and better than those who came before them. Today, I am with Steve Karagioules. Steve helps managers turn into high-performing team leaders that positively impacts their results and organizations. Steve is also the author of the book, The Heart of a Champion. In this book, Steve highlights the 5 easy principles of success and happiness. Hi, Steve. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm impressed you got my name right. So that's a great. I'm doing better even now.
Yeah, it is quite a hard second name to pronounce, but yeah, managed to get it. And just to get the conversation rolling, really, I mean, you wrote the book, The 5 Principles of Success and Happiness. I would love to know one of the key principles that definitely you would like to share with the audience today.
Yeah, I mean, in it, I'm going to talk about I talk about knowing your why and your work ethic and being obsessed with and it's a healthy obsession, obviously. But I think to me the most important one is knowing your why. When you're going to go after something, as a leader, as an individual, when you want to achieve something of value, something of substance, you have to know why you're doing it, because it's not
Yeah,
going to be easy. Anything worthwhile is not going to be easy. And
yeah.
so you're going to hit bumps in the road, you're going to hit obstacles. And that's when a lot of people fail, right?
Mm.
I don't know if you know this. I think it's January 19th. It's called Quitter's Day or something like that. And it's when most people give up on their resolutions. But it's
Wow.
often because people come up with resolutions or come up
Yeah.
with goals or targets, but never start with what is their core value? Why are they
Mm.
going after this? So in the
Yeah.
book, I talk about how the why is like a torch when you're going through a dark forest,
Yeah.
and it's going to be that light or the fuel for that fire when the going gets tough. So if you know your
Mm.
why, you can continue and you can keep going towards what it is you want to achieve.
Yeah. I love that analogy. And I'm pretty sure throughout this discussion today, we're definitely going to learn a little bit about how you discovered your why as well.
Yeah.
So, one of the key pivotal moments that you often speak about is joining the Army Cadets when you were in your teens. Would you like to
Yeah.
take us through that story and what it really taught you as well?
Yeah. I mean, I was a troublemaker. I was a high
Mm.
energy kid. I'm sure if I grew up today, I'd be labeled with, some sort of alphabet thing,
Yeah.
ADHD or ADD or something. I was the
Mm.
type of kid who couldn't sit still, and I had a big mouth, and I like to have fun and so on. And the Army Cadets I joined when I was 12 in
Oh,
secondary one
wow.
or grade 7. And it was a recruiting tool for the Canadian Armed Forces at that time,
Mm.
but it was a youth organization. And when I joined, it was fun because it was challenging. It was
Yeah.
tough. I remember on my first day, they gave us push-ups because because I spoke and I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to, and so somebody gave me push-ups, and I went back. I went with 2 friends, and they didn't go back. They were like,
Yeah.
"No, we're not doing this," and I was like, "Fun push-ups, like
Yeah.
challenging." And so that was really. I stayed in the Army Cadets from 12 to 19. I became the first of many things in my
Mm.
cadet corps. I led 75 cadets when I was only 16.
Oh, wow.
And so I learned leadership, which I really had a liking for. Like, how do you get people to follow you, but not through force, but
Yeah.
rather through influence, right? How do you get them
Mm.
to want to follow you? And so that was something I really enjoyed. And then all the challenges, I got to jump out of airplanes with the Canadian Armed Forces. I
Oh,
got to
that's pretty
climb a
cool.
glacier. I got to go into a glacier. I got to do a lot of things
Yeah.
that when in the neighborhood I grew up in, a lot of the kids were getting into trouble. I was going away in summer camp and doing a
Yeah.
lot of these great activities. So to me, that changed. It taught me discipline,
Mm.
which I have a speaking engagement on Saturday, and it's all about how discipline is what leads to excellence. Excellence
Yeah.
isn't anything but the discipline and the little things that you build up and put together to get there.
Wow. And around that sort of leading the 75 cadets and trying to get people to, I guess, follow you through influence, what are some of the key things that you did to actually get them to follow you? It must have been quite hard. I mean, leading like a bunch of teens. So
Yeah.
what are some of those core principles that you still live by today that help you to influence others?
Yeah. I mean, for one, it's leading by example.
Mm.
If you're going to, and if you look at it in the Army cadets or in the military, you want somebody to have like great uniform, sharp
Yeah.
drill, discipline. But if you're the kind of leader, and coming up in the cadets, I saw other people like this who told you that you had to be a certain way, but then didn't
Mm.
do it themselves. And
Yeah.
so for me, leading by example is paramount to being a good leader. You've got to
Mm.
walk the talk. So if you're going to ask it of your people, you have to be able to do it. And
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the key principles. And then it's being personable and understanding who your people are,
Mm.
knowing that you can have 75 or you can have 5 people who are following, but those 5 people are not going to be influenced the same way. And as a leader,
Yeah.
the only way you're going to get to influence them in their way, which as a leader, you need to go and serve your people. You need to go to your people, not the other way
Mm.
around. You need to understand them.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the two big principles. Obviously, there's a bunch of others, but
Yeah.
those are really two big ones. And if you could be personable and understand your people, then it's going to avoid a lot of the other things like not caring for them, not caring for what
Mm.
happens, and just leading out of ego. So that's one. And I think if you can lead by example, that also is going to it's going to humble you a little bit, because if you're asking something, and I do that to this day, I whether be it business, I also coach
Yeah.
CrossFit, and I was doing a boot camp last night, and I do the boot camp with the people, and it's tough, and I make it
Mm.
tough, and I love it when they say, "Oh, even you're struggling," and I'm like, "Of
Yeah.
course, I build it so
Yeah.
that we struggle." So I think that's and it gets the respect of people, right? So when you can lead
Yeah.
by example, I think that's a big key.
Yeah. And one really interesting thing that I picked up from that story as well, around you desiring the challenge and actually having the energy to go for it. You know, two people left and you were the one that stayed. I think that's
Yeah.
a really, really interesting attribute. And would you say that's quite a key attribute to have, especially when you are trying to go for leadership, actually desiring the challenge and actually desiring to push yourself?
Yeah, that was a motivation for me starting Pathfinder, my consulting and coaching company. Is
Mm.
um, I see that a lot of times people will become leaders because that's their progression in their career,
Mm.
but it's not necessarily because they have an aspiration to lead.
Yeah.
And as leaders, we have to, like I said, lead by example. We have to push people to gain to go for their potential.
Mm.
And so the challenge, a lot of people shy away from it for a number of reasons, ego being one of them, right? They don't want to fail, they don't want to look bad. And I think that as leaders, it's on us to go for those challenges, to take them on, and
Yeah.
to face them head on, and show the people that failure is just on the road to success. We
Yeah.
know our why, we're going to keep going. And as leaders, if we can do that, that's, I think, how we get a lot of other high performing people to follow us,
Yeah.
and we get our team to achieve the targets. And they're going to be, BHAGs. I don't know if you're the
Yeah.
BHAG, the big hairy audacious goal. When you set those, you may fall short, but you're still achieving a lot more than the success by accident, kind of like we'll
Yeah.
just see what happens. So I think the challenge, and seeking the challenge, even now that I'm older, I'm somebody who people recognize as, hey, you still got that fire. And I think,
Yeah.
and I hope that I'll always have that fire to set the example and show people that we've just got to go for it, because we've only got a short time here.
Yeah.
Let's just do our best while we're here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that challenge mindset of wanting the challenge definitely leads into the second pivotal moment that you often speak about, around changing your course and changing the course towards studying management. I guess that must have had some of an influence there as well around the challenge mindset.
Yeah, yeah. I was done. I was finished with the Army Cadets. I was, or finishing up with the Army Cadets, because it's just a youth organization. At that time,
Mm.
there were a lot of cuts happening in the government, so the military wasn't looking like a good career option. So I decided after high school, oh, I'm going to go and study construction electricity. I like working with my
Yeah,
hands. It's challenging. There's a mental aspect to electricity where you have to do calculations and so on. But I can remember that, my classmates in construction electricity, there were a few who were saying, "What are you doing here? Like, this is not for you."
yeah.
And then I spoke to a mentor of mine at the time who was an officer in the Army Cadets,
Mm.
and I said, I kind of miss that leadership aspect.
Yeah,
And he was the one who recommended me to go study management. So that's where, even in my job at the time, I started learning. I was at Domino's Pizza at the time. I started
yeah,
becoming a manager in training. I went to study in management, and then I switched to, after I did management, I switched into HR because I was like, I like the
Oh, wow.
people aspect. I want to know
Mm,
more about the psychology on how do we get the best out of people in organizations.
mm,
And so that's part of how I'm here today.
yeah. And along that journey, how did that help you navigate your why and actually find your purpose?
Well, I realized that, for one, I like doing things with my hands. I like, fixing things and so on, but I like doing it for me.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not as keen on going out and doing it for others. So that was the first thing, was
Mm,
I think I wouldn't have been as happy, or what probably would have happened is, before long, I would have kind of been pulled back into management. Either as an
yeah.
electrician, I would have gone and studied I would have gone into managing other electricians. So I think that studying it and then working in it at the same time, it was just a natural draw. It was
Mm,
something that I like to do. I like efficiency. So I
yeah.
plan efficiency. I look at how things are working, and I'm like, we could do this better. We could do this. We can go further, faster, for less. And so I think that it was a natural draw, and throughout my career, I've sometimes have, like, not gone into management just because I was like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, let me try something else." I went into sales, and 8 months later they were like, "Do you want to lead our HR and training in this office?" And so it kind of pulled me back in, and
Yeah.
I think it's just my natural, my personality. It's what I'm drawn to.
Yeah. And in your management consultancy, have you come across individuals who might not have that natural tendency to actually be in a leadership position? And what do you advise them?
Yeah, I see it a lot, actually.
Mm,
And I think it's again coming back to, whenever I start coaching with someone, we start by looking at their values, like, what is important to them,
mm,
both professionally and personally, and often those are linked. And those values, um, and usually when we get to it, you can still find some things there. It's not so much that they don't want to be leaders. I think sometimes people just don't realize what it takes to be a leader. So when you get into a
mm,
management role, it's not just a position of authority, it's a position of responsibility. And you
yeah.
have people that you are responsible for and that you have to serve, removing their obstacles and providing resources. So
Mm,
once I'm able to show them that, hey, um, this is what you value, let's find a way to put that into your goals professionally so that you
yeah.
can work towards them. Can often get them on the right path and towards what's going to make them feel more accomplished, and actually not just feeling it, but being more accomplished.
Yeah. And I guess to really flick on, I guess to make the link as well towards the purpose as well. I guess values and purpose are really interlinked there. So that's a really interesting way, I guess, to get people on board with their values to direct them towards becoming a better leader. So I really like
Yeah,
that approach as well.
yeah. Because often, I mean, people go into management often because it's career progression, but there's also something there where they're like,
Mm,
I see something, think I can do something, and then they're overwhelmed. There's a fact that I state over and over and over again that I read in Forbes, which was 58% of managers have zero leadership training. So
wow.
they go in, and they end up working, doing the job, because they
Yeah.
don't know how to lead others to do it. And
Mm,
so in working with them, I one help them see that, look, as a leader, as a manager, 75% of your time has to be managing and leading. You've got to
mm,
rally the troop. You've got to get them going to
yeah.
achieve the goals. Because if you're doing it, who's managing? Who's leading? And
Yeah.
so I think, it's always good. They've got something there. It's just a question of going to find them. And as a coach, I've done a pretty good job so far at being able to find that.
Yeah. And I guess to come on to the final pivotal moment, which is actually writing and publishing your book, which we mentioned at the start. Tell us a little bit about the journey to actually getting there and what made you do it.
Yeah. So this when we talk about challenge and we talk about leading by example, I was the training director for Canada,
Yeah.
um, and I had to do a presentation, and the expectation was I would get up and just talk about the training program, but I had
Mm,
500 franchisees and managers in front of me. And so I decided I'm not just going to do a presentation.
yeah.
So I wrote a speech to try and inspire them.
Mm.
to get them to go for more, because I was seeing a lot of the franchisees kind of like settling and being okay with where they were, and we wanted to get them to really floor it, right? So I figured, you know what, I'm going to give a speech, and it's not going to speak to everybody, but it will
Yeah.
speak to a few. And so I wrote this speech, and in the crowd was a franchisee from the UK who has, and now they've grown, their organization has
Mm.
grown substantially. But at the time, they had 200 stores, so very
Oh,
big franchisee,
yeah.
highly respected. And after the speech, they came up to me and they said, "We love it, we loved
Mm.
it. Will you come to the UK and give this speech?" And I was like, "Of course! Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
So they flew me out, and I gave the speech, and I did it with their managers, and there was about, I think, another 500 or 600 people there, and they
Yeah.
really loved it. And then I started realizing there's something here.
Mm.
There's something here that is speaking to people. So I looked at the speech, I broke it down, and I wrote the book. And it's not a 400-page book. It's about 100 pages. It's very
Yeah.
straight to the point, very clear. Um, but that's the book came from going outside of my comfort zone. I don't usually get nervous speaking in front of groups, but having a
Yeah.
speech versus a presentation where I can just go with whatever the slides are. I had a word by word for word speech that I written
Yeah.
up. So I was nervous. So I got out of the comfort zone. And then with the book, I always had a goal to write a book. So I said,
Mm.
this is my goal and I'm going to do it. And so again, it's about getting out of the comfort zone, leading
Yeah.
by example, and setting goals and going to achieve them.
Yeah, and that's really interesting actually, because a lot of the time, especially when I've spoken to authors on the podcast, it's actually something that they've done that's out of their comfort zone, and then
Yeah.
they sort of place a flag in the planet, as to say, in terms of it making it a landmark with a book. So that's
Yeah.
really interesting as well.
Yeah, there's something I read that like people wanting to write books but not getting it is one of the most failed goals out there, right? Like
Mm.
people want to do, and they've got all this knowledge or passion in their head, but they just never get to it. And so
Yeah.
I had said I'm not going to be one of those people, even if
Yeah.
it's a rinky-dink awful book, which it isn't. I think it's a great book, but
Yeah.
even if it is, I'm going to be someone who's going to be able to say I'm a published author.
Yeah.
And so I have the highest regard to anybody who goes and does that, because you're putting yourself out there, you're getting your book and your work out there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
And that's again leading by example. We've got to do that as leaders. We got to get out of our comfort zone and not be afraid of the naysayers and doubters. The people who have done it will never criticize. The
Yeah.
people who are gonna criticize are the ones who wouldn't rise to the occasion.
Mm. And to end off the podcast, we always ask our guest one thing they would advise their younger self.
As a younger, don't be afraid. Go for it.
Mm.
When I was younger, just like anybody else, as much as I would go for the challenge and push, I think there was still doubt, there was still um, fear that held me back. And now, as a father of two, married, and with a lot of responsibility, taking these
Yeah.
risks have a higher, there's much more weight behind it.
Mm.
Younger, I should have gone for it, and so that would be it. Is don't be afraid, go for it. You've got what it takes, and the worst that's going to happen is you're going to fail, and you get back up and you try
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Great advice. Is there anywhere where people can find you, um, if they wanted to catch up and have a talk with you?
Yeah, so they can on LinkedIn. I'm at Steve Karagioules. It's probably not the easiest name, but if you find me on Instagram at leadership.pathfinder, or my website is onlineleadershipschool.com.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks, Steve. It's been wonderful speaking to you, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tavian. It was awesome.
And you've just listened to another Better Conversation, and we hope to see you next time.